Is America cursed? Do I believe America is cursed? No, America's not cursed. But I believe that God wants us to get some things right. And I believe that God is pointing something to our attention. This country is going to go down a very dark slope and a very dark path. And it's already happening. And I believe God wants us to pay attention to what God is here. And I believe what God is here is what we've sown in the past. And when I talk about what we've sown, I'm not talking about slavery. I'm not talking about segregation. I'm talking about what we have sown in people, and specifically parents and their children. Because, I mean, it's cliche to say that children are the future, but, you know, if you think about it, you were once a child, and the way that you think now, the things that you do, you know, your childhood and your upbringing is what guided you to where you are today. Whether you consciously perceive that day to day or not, this is just the reality of how human beings work. God wants us to see how important people's positions are as parents. It's a very big responsibility, and I believe that God is showing us that if you don't take that responsibility seriously, other people will do the job for you. Now, when I say other people, I'm not talking about specific people, but for example, people in general. People are always looking for guidance, especially young people, children. So if you cannot provide that to them, they're gonna find it in other ways. We live in a society where access to media and entertainment and all of these things are abundant. When you cannot provide that, they will seek it and find it elsewhere. Not only that, there are people who see this weakness in the fabric of society. So then when they find this alternative source of guidance, it may not be the best for them. And that's something that affects everyone as a whole in society. People don't understand the value of an individual. They don't understand how powerful the thoughts, the actions of one person can actually be. It's like you may think that you're just one person and what you do is not that significant. But everything that's going on today, it took one person to do this one thing, to say this one thing, to do this. It's a collective of our own thoughts, actions, and our own beliefs. And this is all our own doing. If we see that we're having problems now in our society and we want something different, we're gonna have to take a different approach. It's like, what do they say? You can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So I feel like the past couple of years, there's been like a peak where people see, okay, whatever's going on, it's not good. I feel like collectively, we're all searching for something, but you're not gonna find any sustainable solutions, I would say, until we find a way to do things differently. I believe that it has to start with the importance and value of how people raise their children, because these people will be the future politicians. They will be the future teachers. They will be the future doctors. They will be the future economists. And, you know, even if they're not doing jobs on that level, but everything every person does, every individual's life has meaning and has value and adds to whatever happens on a collective mass level. How people raise their children is very important, and it shouldn't be taken so lightly. And if people really care about this country, people have to understand that we're fighting. If people do believe that we're fighting something and we have issues that need to be resolved, we're fighting a spiritual battle, and we are all spiritual beings. I also think that's something very important that people have to instill in their children, because once you understand the importance, or once you understand the reality or the actuality that you're more than some physical body, then I believe people will be more cautious and more intentional when it comes to the way that they think and the information they consume and the entertainment they consume and things like that. And these are all things that, I mean, they're not my place to you know, like, it's not my place to tell somebody this is what you need to watch, or this is the kind of information this is something that's supposed to be instilled in people from a young age. And as they grow, they can have a foundation, so when they see things out here in the real world, they can filter things out, and they can have some sort of a compass that's guiding, you know, what they choose to engage in, or what people choose to engage in. This is a bigger issue than we're giving importance to. It's not to diminish the importance of other issues or social, political issues. It's not to diminish them. It's just to say that a lot of bigger mass problems can be avoided, or would have been avoided by now. We would have all been on a much different path if people would take their God-given responsibility as parents more seriously. There's some good parents out there, and no one's perfect. There's some people who probably don't have the tools, and that's when I believe Christianity comes in handy. That's when I believe principles in the Bible come in handy, because when we don't know, God knows. And you know, these are things that they seem so simple, and you know, can seem like they're not a big deal. Just something as simple as instilling biblical principles in children, you know, guiding children from a righteous foundation. Something that seems as simple as this, you know, can prevent, you know, some shooting that's happening right now in an urban area. You know, something like that can prevent, you know, this person who's about to commit suicide or something. Something like that can prevent this person who was molested and is gonna have a baby, and she's thinking about abortion, and that can something like that can prevent someone like that from being in that situation in the first place. You know, something as simple as, you know, raising children on a biblical righteous foundation can prevent this terrorist from ever even becoming one. It seems like an oversimplification, but it's just a reality of how I would say the human mind works. Something as simple as spirituality, and acknowledging that God knows better than we do. If we knew what we were doing, I'm talking about like the human collective, human beings in general, if we had it all figured out, all of these things that are going on right now would not be happening. If our way was so smart, so brilliant, so good for us, people wouldn't be suffering like they're suffering today. You know, people wouldn't be dying the way that they're dying today. You know, indulging in drugs and overindulging in like sex and all these, like, people wouldn't need to seek all of these outside, you know, sources of happiness and things like that. Something as simple, or it seems simple, but it's not simple at the same time, because when you do realize that you're a spiritual being, you understand that there are other spiritual beings. There are outside forces. There are forces outside of us that are always working. As far as the way that children are raised, and children in general, like, that's a bigger issue than whatever other social issues somebody might see that's important or think that's important. Like, this is so important. I believe that we're being way too passive about these children's lives, or your own children's lives. If anyone watching this video believes in God, I think you should understand that God is very grieved to see that we as a whole, as a country, as a society, are so passive when it comes to what happens to these children in society. Children shouldn't be exposed to certain things at a certain age. You know, gender studies and sex studies and all of these things, it's like, those things don't have their place in a young child's mind. I understand like some schools need to have sex education and things like that, but maybe like I don't understand how we as a society, we're not saying, okay, this is the limit. This is how much should be allowed to be taught, and this is where we put a cap on it. This is where we say, okay, you're crossing boundaries. I believe that parents need to enforce boundaries when it comes to their children. In every facet of society, it's like no source outside of you should have so much authority over your children and what they intake. Even Jesus Christ talked about how we have to be very mindful of the things that we take in as far as our ear gates and eye gates. So if he's talking to us and we're grown, right? Imagine like children. Imagine how susceptible a child is and how impactful just the slightest negative image, how deep of a root that can take in a young child's mind. God's given parents the responsibility to say, okay, this is a boundary. You know, like if your children are going to school and they're learning something, you need to know everything that's being taught in that school. They need to run that by you before, you know, it's even implemented. It's the parents' responsibility to enforce boundaries on what on what children are being taught, and not just in schools, but in society in general. You shouldn't go to a toy store and someone else tells you that your daughter has to buy, or your child, your son has to buy this toy, this figure with a rainbow on it, and the rainbow symbolizes things that are directly correlated to sexuality. That should not be by default something that, you know, that's just there for children to just engage in or just to consume. That shouldn't be something, it shouldn't be a default. It should be something that people have a say in, you know, and people are just, I feel like people are just so passive about that. It's like, it's not just a bunch of colors. It's not just something colorful. It's like people have to be aware, and this is also something that Jesus Christ talked about, is being mindful and being vigilant, more mindful and more vigilant about what's going on out in the world and what these things actually mean. So then when they see it, they can recognize it. It's like there's a lot passively happening, and because of people's neglect and people's disconnection from their role as parental figures in these children's lives, these children are passively and by default being programmed and being taught certain things in the slightest way, in ways that if you don't understand, you won't even pick up on it. And that's a problem. I just think people need to get it together and really have the mind of God when they evaluate things that are going on in the outside world. And I believe that people need to understand how important spirituality is, and that needs to be a foundation of people's thoughts when they filter and, you know, process information, so that when something, you know, that seems as simple as, oh, we're putting these colors together and we're gonna put it on a toy or put it on a book cover for, you know, a 5-year-old or 8-year-old, it's like you'll be able to understand what's going on, and you won't just be passively engaging, you know, in the destruction of your own child. Because God's not going to punish other people for your own responsibility. God is going to allow it because it was your responsibility as a parent. I feel like I'm the person who's trying to be like all kumbaya and let's all love each other and let's all not see our differences. And I admit it's hard. It's hard to be kumbaya with a bunch of different people with they're stuck in their ways, and this one's stuck on this thing and this and this and this. But if there's ever a reason to put that stuff aside, and if there's a valid reason, it should at least be for the sake of the children of society. People take things so personal. Everything is about, you know, the ego. But it's like, what about these children? It's like they literally have to face a repercussion for your ego. This is what people are sowing. This is what we're sowing on a collective level. You know, it's just all about me, my ego, my ego, my ego. It seems that everyone's so concerned about their egos. And, you know, I believe that children have to, it's like all this baggage that they have to carry. And no one's cognizant of how that's going to affect them in the future. For example, when it comes to like black people, our ancestors, they didn't do us the way that we're doing the children now. It's like people fought, you know, so certain people can have the right to be intellectuals today, you know, have the right to be a business owner, have the right to do all these things, have the right to play your instruments or to rap your lyrics and all that stuff, you know, have the right to build wealth and all those things. And yeah, things happen along the way. Human nature is always going to be human nature. But I think it's just so wrong that people fought for us to have all of these things, and now that we have it, and these kids, you know, because thank God other people paved the way, now they can go to school, they can do all these things, they can build wealth, they can be whatever they want to be. But the focal point of their existence is the baggage that people had in the past, when I don't think that was the mission. When people were fighting, you know, for people to be free and for people to have certain rights as human beings, I don't think their mission was to impose these things on little children. It's like, wow, children have to be activists. Wow, that's too much. It's like, why should an elementary school kid be worrying about activism and all this? Like, wow, they need to be playing in a playground and thinking about, what do I want to be in the future? You know, and it doesn't have to revolve around, you know, race. It doesn't have to revolve around their skin color. They can be whatever the hell they want to be. They need to focus on that. Dreaming, you know, being happy, like playing. Why should children have so much baggage at such a young age? That's too much for them. That's not their responsibility. In elementary school, a child's responsibility is not, how are they going to be an activist for their race? How are they going to figure out what they like as far as sexuality? That should not be a child's concern at such a young age. Like, no child has to be worrying about the things. These are grown people problems, and grown people fought to solve these problems. If they feel like it's still an issue, that's not an issue for children to be worrying about. You know, it's like that kid could be anything they want to be because people have paved the way for that. They have to walk around and think about how the heavy burden of somebody who was molested by a man and they think they're a woman, and why do little kids have to carry that burden for other people? It's not right. And if somebody can't perceive what I'm saying, it's because you don't have the mind of God. You know, every time I talk about, oh, children shouldn't be, you know, digesting like LGBTQ information all the time and things like that. Not even all the time, period. Like, no child should be worrying about that unless it happened to them. And if it happened to them, that's something that a child's parents need to figure out within that unit, behind closed doors. It's such a mass, like, open thing to just be engaging children in the conversations of sexuality, and it's a part of their existence. It's like, I don't want to see a 4-year-old girl with a Barbie doll and it's like with a rainbow on it and this and that. And we already know that all the cartoons and stuff, they're telling them all these messages that are directly correlated to what the rainbow now stands for. It's like, that's too much. That's too much for a child. And if somebody thinks that I'm being bigoted or whatever, or I'm being, you know, like whatever, it's like, you really need the mind of God, because you can't be, it's like, to not comprehend what I'm saying is to be anti-humanity in a sense. Because why would you keep a child so much in their lower nature? I believe God wants us to get it right. And God wants people to understand the weight of our individual lives and the weight of raising individual people, the weight of raising children, and what the repercussions could be, because you're always going to reap what you sow. Whether you believe in God, whether you believe in spirituality or not, you're always going to get a result from what you put into life. And the slightest thing can have a big impact. And I think people need to be very mindful, very aware, and very present in raising their children. And people need to understand what's going on. And I say people need to be vigilant in their kids' lives. It's like, I would hate for people to understand that this needs to happen, and then they still get outside influences that tell them how to do this. Like, I'm not here to tell people, oh, this is what you do to raise your child. That's not my place. That's God's place, you know? So I would hate for that to be something that people realize, and then it becomes a weakness, and the world tries to cater to that weakness or tries to feed off of that weakness. Like, for example, we have this problem of what is it called? Surveillance capitalism, where I think this is another problem, but this is not the topic. So we have this problem of surveillance capitalism where people encroach on our privacy and they cross boundaries and they invade our human right to privacy, and because there's this thing going on where, I believe it's apparent that the nuclear family needs to be held accountable. You go to, I have this Cash App. You go inside of the Cash App and all of a sudden it says family support, and it gives you the option to spy on your child. It's like, that's of the world. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, in order to raise your child, you need to deprive them of basic human rights. And somebody in Silicon Valley or some entity or some big tech group can be a part of that or tell you how to do that. I don't think, I think, people need to be wise and vigilant and understand that this has nothing to do with any of that. It's like, it shouldn't be so bad that people have to resort to, I have to spy on my children now. No, it's not up to Silicon Valley. It's not up to Meta Universe, whatever the hell they call themselves, Meta Company, Meta Facebook, Meta Cash App, Meta this app. It's not up to them to decide this is the way that you control your children. They know nothing about that, and they have no say in that. And this is the problem in the first place. We look outside of ourselves and outside of God and outside of those boundaries for guidance on how, to guide your children and how to, properly instill, discipline and things like that. It shouldn't get so bad that you have to have some Silicon Valley big tech company telling you, this is how you spy on your children. It shouldn't get to that point. It should be between you. Whatever you do should be between you, God, your spouse, or whatever. I mean, things happen, so everything's not traditional in the way that it used to be, which is a part of the issue, but that's another conversation. But it shouldn't be at that level where, the things that they're doing to us as far as, invading our privacy, which I don't know why people don't see that as such a big deal. It is a big deal. It shouldn't get to that point where you have to spy on each other. No. It should be at a point where people believe that they have the say-so in what big tech is doing. They don't tell you. They shouldn't tell you. Like, who are they to tell you how to raise your children or how to see what your children are doing, how to monitor what they're doing? That is not their place. But I believe that it is people's place to say, okay, well, this is what you're not gonna do. What you're not gonna do is put this and that out for my children to have access to. What you're gonna do is have me be a part of the process as far as how we're gonna regulate how children access information and how they're able to access it and things like that. That should be, at this point in society, people need to be actively a part of the process as far as what's happening with big tech. Big tech doesn't tell you how to raise your children, how to spy on your children. No. I believe people should be more, demanding or more feel more entitled, because all of these big companies, all of these big giants or whatever, they wouldn't have all of the power that they have now if it wasn't for us seeing that they're providing a valuable service. So while as we've done that for them, we also have the position to be like, okay, well, this is getting out of hand, and this is what you're not going to do, and you're not going to tell me that this is how I need to do it. And I feel like, as people, we are entitled. We are children of God, like, this is our world, like God put us here to live our lives with him, with his instruction. So our lives shouldn't be in reverse, revolving around some big tech company, some big mass entity, or some entity telling you how to raise your kids, how to live your life. This is what you're supposed to think about politics. This is what you're supposed to stand for. This is not the way that God designed for us to live. Our lives were not made to revolve around mass entities outside of ourselves and outside of God. Because, at the end of the day, these people are not worthy to have such an influence and such a place in our lives and in everything we do and every decision that we make, because this is about us. This is our planet. This is our world. It's about us, and if we're gonna look and seek something outside of us, it has to be God, because who else is worthy? Who else has earned that position? Not what Facebook, Meta this, Meta Cash, whatever. No, it's weird to say, but people need to be more into themselves as far as like valuing themselves as individuals. Like, who the hell is a big tech? Who is a Facebook? Who is Instagram? Who is some cable TV station? Some cartoon station? Who is some book publishing company? Who is some school curriculum, school board committee who's approving, stuff that you didn't approve? Like, who are all of these people to have such an influence on your children in society, and creating all of these problems? They create all of these problems, and then they tell you that they're gonna solve it. And then they take control of your children and try to have your children do their dirty work just to keep them in a position of God. It's like, I don't know. It's like, so if things continue to unfold and people aren't happy with the outcomes of what's going on in society, it's our fault. It's like, we have to see our place in this, and we have to value ourselves, and we have to understand God's place in our lives, and really put value on God's place in our lives. Because if God doesn't have that spot, next thing you know, Facebook has that spot, Instagram, all these big tech companies who are here to serve us. They are servants to us. How can we be their slave? It doesn't make any sense. We're the ones who empower companies. They provide a service to us. So if once they start to cross boundaries, we have the right to say, okay, you've overstepped, your boundary, and you need to get in your place. It is our place to do that as children of God, as human beings. We have this authority and we have this say so, but we'll never realize it as long as we're so scattered and we're so, this person's, it's like we're fighting all of their dirty battles, like we're doing all of their dirty work. These people decided, okay, you're this skin color, this is what your purpose in life is. You're this LGBT, this happened to you when you were a child, or you have an issue with your sexuality, this is the purpose of your life. This is what you're supposed to do. You're a white person and you work this job and whatever. This is what we want you to do. This, it's like, who are they? They are not God to give you a purpose. They are not God to give your children a direction in life. And they have us all doing their dirty work, fighting for whatever they want you to fight for, pleading against this person and bickering against this person for whatever they want you to bicker about. And what do we get in return? You know, what do we get in return? You know, we have this beautiful country, and some people think it'll benefit them to go against it, to sabotage it. But maybe you need to think a little bit more long term. And maybe you need to think with the mind of God, so you can really understand that it's not beneficial to you in the long run. Because if anything is important, like, forget, let's say people aren't ready to think about, getting along and this and that, whatever. If you can't fathom getting along with like another race or something like that, if anything should be important to you, whatever race you are, whoever you are, it should be your human right as an individual. And if you understand the shift that's being taken place, even if they say it's to benefit your race or whatever, if you understand what's going on, you would understand that we're heading towards a direction that does not value human rights. You know, it's more about, you know, like what is this going to do economically for these entities that we've given godly authority to? That's really what it's about. And maybe you'll get a little something here and there. We're heading in a direction where, you know, they want to benefit the Black community. And let's say that was the case. But is it really worth it if you have no real human rights? Like, come on, why these people, they get to spy on you 24/7. They tell you how to live your life. You can earn, but you can't break this earning cap, because they have things set up where it's half socialism, half whatever. And it's just like, you know, when I say putting a cap, it's like, okay, right now you can do whatever you want to do. If you can't perceive it, you can find the tools to get that perception. But like, what is it like to not have your human rights, get your human rights violated freely by some entities, and then they tell you that you can only earn a certain amount because we'll give you enough to be comfortable and take care of yourself. And you can do art. You like to do art? Okay, you can draw all you want to. Oh, you like sneakers? You can buy all the sneakers that you can possibly imagine. You can be a creative, you know. But then it's like who are these people to put a cap on your earnings and to put a cap on your potential? Because not only that, then they tell you this is how you walk, this is how you talk, this is what you like, this is who you hang with. Who are they? You know, it's like, is it really worth it? But maybe to some people it could be worth it. Maybe that's more important. I don't know, maybe, which is very strange to me, maybe a society that says Black is valuable is more important than it actually being valuable, in a sense where Black people have their human rights intact and have their connection to God intact. Then it's over. But it's like, maybe just like having the images and the symbols are enough for some people. But, you know, for someone who's thinking in their right mind, I would think that you would understand that that's not enough, and that's only scratching the surface of what you're entitled to, not as a Black person, but as a human being who is made in the image and likeness of God. If people were to value the responsibility that God has given parents, and if that was something that was held to a higher level, and people really understood that they were spiritual beings, that they are spiritual beings, if people understand the importance of giving God his place in our lives, if we understand the importance of guiding ourselves, if people were to understand the importance of raising their children righteously on the foundation of God and principles of God, entities outside of us would have no authority. When I'm talking about entity, I mean spiritual entities. I mean big tech entities and big political entities. These entities would have no power and no right to invade our human rights as children of God. Everything that's happening is very ego-based. We all have our egos, and we're fighting for these, I don't want to say meaningless, because everything that people are fighting for is not meaningless, and some of it is very valid, but there are different approaches to take. What I'm saying is that there are some heavy things that people find to be valuable, and it's unfortunate that the children of society have to be the ones to carry this baggage. And it's not fair to them. And we will always reap what we sow. So if we're sowing in a way that's having a negative impact on the future of society, when we get, when we get those negative results, when things go south, when we keep putting value on entities and people out that are not God, we're gonna get what we deserve when things go south, when things get darker, when life takes a turn for the worse in the future. And we're on that path already. It's already happening. But I guess maybe one day, I don't expect everyone, but maybe one day a good chunk of us will realize what's going on. We'll realize that we're wrong. I'm saying when I think about it from a collective point of view, because this is all affecting us, and the slightest thing you do can affect another person and can affect the situation. So this is our problem. This is everyone's problem. So when things take a turn for the worst, we will all be responsible for the negative impact, is what I want to say. And we can't blame God, because God is warning us and God is showing us. God is bringing it to our attention. A whole pandemic happened, and I guess it's fun at this point. It seems to be fun. Everybody's talking about, World Economic Forum and the elite class and what they want to do, where they're taking this and what they're doing. They, them. Yes, we've made it all about them. We've given them all of our power. We've given them all authority over our lives. We've given them God's place. And if they take the position that we've given them, God is not going to intervene, because we literally put these people on a pedestal, and we said that they are more powerful than God himself. And when things unfold and God just says, okay, cool, and just let things spiral downhill because of leaving our lives to the direction of man, it's going to be our fault. And we can't complain, because God has tried to warn us. God, like I was saying earlier before I went on a tangent, God allowed a whole pandemic. God allowed all of this downtime for us to see, to reveal, for us to see, and to maybe stop looking outside of ourselves all of the time. It's like during this downtime, instead of us going internally to say, how can I analyze my part in this situation? We started, and I'm a part of it too. We're to blame as a collective. All we've done was pinpoint this group, that group, these people, the World Economic Forum, them, Mark Zuckerberg, whoever that owns this Twitter thing, this social media thing, this entity, this school, that school. But nobody, we didn't take the time to see that God is trying to show us something, because we put these people on a pedestal. We saw, wow, man is doing something to me, when man cannot do anything to you. This is what Jesus Christ taught. No one can do anything to you. Everything that is done is either allowed or the will of God. So I believe that during this pandemic, or the pandemic, during that downtime, we were all supposed to learn a lesson, and we were all supposed to see that it is God that is trying to show us things. And we were all supposed to give God back his place and understand that nothing outside of you can affect you unless you've given it that power. And that's all that we've done. That's all we've done. We've bickered and we've fought, and we're still doing it. And it's this person, that person, it's this group, it's that group, it's this elite class, it's this and that. But no one can take anything from you. No one can do anything to you unless it is either allowed by God, or unless you've been passively giving your life and offering your power and offering yourself off to these people and these entities. And it's human nature, and it's the way of the world. It's the laws of the world. Whatever you allow it's gonna happen to you. Like, you can't blame people for taking advantage at this point. Not people, but I'm saying big entities, because regardless if people think, oh, we're heading towards a more equal and egalitarian and what's the other, we're heading towards equality in society, and it's just, things are gonna even out, the playing field is gonna be fair for once, and all of this and all of that. Regardless if that's your perception, I mean, maybe you have valid research and valid collective support for these claims or support for this belief. Even if that's what you believe, at the end of the day, capitalists will always rule the world. That is just the way that the human existence has evolved. It's about what you produce, and who's producing, who's consuming. It's always going to be about that, because we're human beings. We have a physical body, we have physical needs, we have sensory needs. Nobody has sensory needs. We don't need to stimulate our senses, but we're human beings and we have senses, and we want to consume, and we need things or whatever. So it's like, you can never remove that, as long as humans have this thing called desire. So there's always going to be a producer, there will always be a consumer. So if these producers have already gained so much power because we believe that they were God, we gave them the position of God in our lives. Even if you think you're going to be living in a society that's more equal and the playing field is more even, this and that, the haves are going to keep on growing and the have-nots will never catch up. That's the way that it's gonna be. It's still gonna be the same group of people that we've put on a pedestal as God. Not even people. I'm not even gonna put a face to. I don't know who these people are. I don't know who's behind Facebook. I might see Mike Zuckerberg and it's a whole bunch of other people. So it's like, it's not about people, but since we've already given these entities and these big companies, and we've already given them all of this power. A change in the organization of the financial structure of America is not going to take that power away from these people, and it's not going to empower us as people, because the only empowerment that we can find as people is understanding who we are and aligning ourselves with God, which is the only way that you can truly know who you are, and which is the only way you can maximize your potential, and you can reach the level that you believe that you're supposed to be at. I just hope that one day, maybe very soon, we can get it together and understand what's really going on, and understand what God's place is in this situation, and what God is trying to bring to our attention, and what direction God wants to steer our lives in. We're doing things without God, and the results are showing, and it's not a good end. Not for us, not for this country, not for anybody, except for, I guess, the people who we've given godly positions to, or the place of God to, or the entities, I would say. Except for the entities we've put on a pedestal as God. So I just really hope that people can understand that they need God in their lives, that we need God in our lives, and we need God's direction, and the future is in our hands, and it starts with children, and it starts with the way that they are raised. And I don't know about other societies, but in this American society, God is important, and doing life without God is only going to impact our individual lives and lead us to make decisions that create chaos around us on a collective level. So I'm just going to leave it at that.